Sighing, Carter crossed the room and wrapped an arm around her shoulders, tucking her against him. "Baby, what just happened?" she said again. Damn it, I don't get it. We've never had a fight like that. She's never acted like that. What started it?" Roz sniffled. "Me." Then she started to cry. "I just can't help it. I'm scared. I'm worried. And, well, all this crazy talk about Law, I don't really think it's him, but what if it is? She's so close to him and she sobbed against his shirt." Carter rubbed his cheek against her short, soft curls. "It's okay, darling. I understand. We all love him. Nobody wants to think he could do this. I don't think he did. But we worry." Roz continued to cry. He simply stood there and held her, stroking her back. There wasn't much else he could do. His nice, quiet little town had gone crazy, Remy realized with more than a little dismay. It was early Friday morning. He needed to be in his office, and instead, he was trapped in the doorway of the cafe. In his left hand, he held his laptop bag. In his right hand, he held a cup of coffee that had already started to cool. Keeping his frustration hidden, he stared into Deb Sparks's eyes and tried to figure out just what in the hell she expected of him. "Well," she demanded, her voice shrill, strident. Her eyes, a pale, almost colorless shade of blue, peered at him and he could tell by the stubborn set of her shoulders, the lift of her chin that she expected an answer. She wasn't the only one, either. She had 4 other people with her. Earl Prather was standing there, just a few feet away, and he was watching the whole damn thing with just a little too much amusement for Remy's liking. "Miss Sparks, I can't issue a warrant when there is no proof," Remy said. He'd already mentioned that little fact 3 times. "You have proof," she snapped. Remy barely resisted the urge to wince. Her voice could break glass, he'd swear to it. "No, we don't. What we have is a body that appears to have been placed there. Law Riley wasn't on the premises when she was put there. He wasn't in the state when she was killed." Her eyes widened. In a dramatic voice, she said, "They can fool coroners, you know. Putting the body on ice, all sorts of things. I've seen it on court TV, CSI, Law and Order. And just because he claims he wasn't in the state doesn't mean he wasn't. Did you look for ice? Did you? Ice. What in the hell? Shit. Put knowledge in the hands of stupid people, and it just made them more stupid," he thought. "No, I didn't look for ice. However, I'm sure the deputies did." And deputies from the sheriff's office spoke with a number of people who can testify to Law Riley's whereabouts, Remy said, looking at Deb's face and then at Prather, then to each of her loyal little crowd of followers. Slowly, as though he was speaking to a child, he said, "Law Riley was not in the state. And, while I'm sure you're just trying to help, this really isn't anything I can discuss with you, any of you." "Why not?" Deb stomped her foot. "I am a taxpayer. I pay your salary, Remy Jennings, and don't you forget it. That means you answer to me." "Oh, now that did it." "No. It does not mean I answer to you. I answer to my superiors, and if you have a problem with how I do my job, take it up with them." He made a display of taking a look at his watch. "Now, if you don't mind, I do have other cases, other taxpayers who are depending on me. Your mama should be ashamed of you, letting a sick pervert like that walk around when you've got the power to stop him," Deb proclaimed. Remy couldn't decide what was more annoying, her strident tones or her habit of making everything sound like a matter of life or death. Turning to look at her, he said, "Ms. Sparks, believe it or not, if I thought Law Riley was guilty, I'd be out there combing through every square inch of the county on my hands and knees myself, looking for proof. But he's not a murderer." He pushed through the small crowd only to come to a dead stop as he started to swing left. Law Riley was standing there, his face an unreadable mask. The woman was with him, her long brown hair swept back and braided, falling over her shoulder in a tail that damn near touched her waist. Law might have been wearing a mask, but the woman, she wasn't. Her face was pale, but her sea-green eyes snapped with fire. She wasn't looking at him, though. She was staring past him with disgust at the people gathered at the foot of the steps. "Bunch of hyenas," she muttered, her voice a low, soft drawl. Then her eyes cut to his. Their gazes locked for a few seconds and she looked away, staring at the concrete as though it held something uniquely fascinating. Hell, Remy found her fascinating. She crashes into a plant stand and gets terrified, but somebody insults her lover and she looked ready to rip throats open? Tearing his eyes away from her pretty, heart-shaped face, he looked at Law Riley. Law cocked a brow. "Good morning, counselor." At the sound of Law's voice, the small crowd at the cafe door went strangely silent. One by one, they eased down the steps, glanced at Law, and then started to slink away. Law would have let them do just that. The woman, though? "Such a nice town, here, Law. So nice of you to invite me for a visit. They stand around talking about you behind your back, but they don't have the courage to look you in the eye when they realize you heard every damn word," she said. "They think you're the sort of sick, murdering coward who could beat and murder a woman, but they don't have the guts to say it to your face. I love a hypocrite, don't you?" That soft, low voice of hers could carry, Remy realized. Amused, he shifted so he could see the reaction from the corner of his eye. Two of them kept walking. One paused and looked back at Law, then at the woman, shamefaced, before hurrying on down the sidewalk. But Deb, damn her, was she stupid or was she just that fond of causing trouble? Lifting her chin, she came closer. Giving Law a nasty look, she then focused her eyes on the woman. Remy still didn't know her name. "Shit. You're making a mistake with this one, young lady." Deb sniffed. "I should know. He's lived here for years, and after you've lived near a person for that long, you get to know them. He's trouble, mark my words." A cool smile spread over the woman's face. "After you've lived near a person for years, huh?" She smirked. "Then I should know. He may be trouble, but he's no murderer. I've known him since I was in diapers. He wouldn't hurt a woman. He doesn't have it in him. And that is something I have on good authority, you can mark my words." A strange, faraway look entered her eyes, one that left Remy with a bad taste in the back of his mouth. Then she blinked and the moment shattered. Looking back at Deb, she said, "Whatever you think you know, you're wrong. You'll figure that out soon enough." She looked away from Deb then, effectively dismissing her. "Come on, Law. Let's get out of here. We can grab some coffee at the bookstore or something. Suddenly, I'm not hungry." As they headed down the sidewalk, Remy fell in step with them. He could have given them several reasons. If he didn't get away from Deb, he might do himself bodily harm, jab himself in the chest with his pen, beat himself in the head with his iPhone until he broke the skin, just to have a reason to escape. But he also needed the woman's name. Even if she belonged to Law, and it looked like she did. Whether Law was still hung up on Lena or not, the woman was loyal to him. but Remy wanted her name. The slim brunette who had cowered in front of Prather but stood up to the worst gossips and bitches this town had to offer. Who was she to him? It will get better, he said to Law. Shit. It will. Right now, it's just news. He grimaced as he said it. It was morbid, it was awful, and it was, plain and simple, true. But sooner or later, people will find something else to talk about. Maybe if we could find who really did kill her, that might help, Law said, his voice sharp. Yes. Remy narrowed his eyes. He'd like that. A lot. He wanted that fucker caught, locked away. He wanted a part in it. Thinking how nice and shiny that might look on your resume or whatever in the hell you lawyer types call it? Law asked cynically. No. I'm thinking how nice it will be for people around here to be able to stop worrying every time their daughters, their wives, their sisters leave the house for work, school, groceries, Remy snapped. He stopped in his tracks and glared at Law. I don't need my ego stroked and I don't need big cases to feel important. If that was what I wanted, I'd be practicing someplace other than here. I just want this town to go back to what it was. Safe. Law's lids drooped, shielding his eyes. A sigh escaped him and he looked away. It's not ever going to be the same town again, Jennings. Not after this. Even if we find him. What he did, it ripped something here and even after it's mended, the fabric of the place. It's torn. The woman reached out and caught Law's hand, squeezed it. But finding him will make it better. At least it will mend things, instead of leaving a big hole, right? Her eyes darted toward Remy, bounced away before really making contact. Law reached out and caught a strand of her hair, tugging on it. It looked like a familiar habit, one he'd done 1,000 times.
Yeah,
I guess. Then he frowned and glanced at Remy. Guess I should introduce you. Remy, this is my friend, Hope. Hope, this is Remy Jennings. If somebody had decided I needed to be arrested, most likely he would have been the one getting the warrants and all that official stuff. Her pale green eyes cooled, from spring green to Arctic ice in the span of seconds, Remy realized. He wanted to glare at Law, but managed not to. Barely. Nobody is going to arrest you without some sort of proof and there isn't any, he said. Law isn't a murderer, she said, her voice flat. I agree with you, Remy said. He held out his hand, wondered if she'd accept. He was mildly surprised when she did. The hand she put in his was small, and slim, as delicate as the rest of her. She gave his hand a quick shake and then pulled back, as if that small touch was all she could stand, or all she wanted. You're a lawyer? Yes. He gave her the same charming smile he'd used to coax his mother into letting him stay up late, the same charming smile he'd used to coax Sandy Reynolds into going to the prom with him, and into losing her virginity with him later that night. It was the same charming smile he'd used on women most of his life and it worked on a pretty regular basis. But she just stared at him, her gaze unreadable, her mouth a flat, unsmiling line. She didn't look charmed at all. Matter of fact, she actually looked a little irritated and she looked like she'd like to get as far away from him as she could. Then she pointedly turned away and focused on Law. Are you still hungry? 60 seconds later, he was standing on the sidewalk and watching her walk away with Law. She never spared him so much as one backward glance. Well, Remy thought, at least he had a name. It was better than nothing. Although why in the hell it mattered, he didn't know. Hope was clearly not interested. And she was clearly all about Law Riley. Everybody in town wants to know why in the hell we haven't arrested him, Prather snapped, jutting his chin up as he faced Nielsen. Everybody? Nielsen barely managed to avoid rolling his eyes. Just who the hell is everybody? Everybody in town. Prather glared at him. Really? Shooting a look at Keith Jennings, he lifted a brow. Sergeant, you live in town, right? I do, Sheriff. Okay. Are you wondering why I haven't arrested Riley? Not for a second. Jennings just smiled. We don't have the sort of proof we need to arrest anybody. Not even Riley, as much as some people might like to think otherwise. Okay. He looked back at Prather. You can relax now. It's not everybody wondering it. Damn it, sure, he snapped his mouth shut, sucked in a slow breath. I apologize. But I have to wonder why you're so dead set on not arresting him. Because, Deputy Prather. I don't see enough proof, and because I know the man has a solid alibi. He looked away, focused on the reports he'd been discussing with Keith before his current pain in the ass had stormed into the office. He didn't need Prather's help to see that more than a few people were of a mind that Law Riley should be arrested. It didn't matter to them that there wasn't really any hardcore evidence pointing toward Law, other than the body that had been found on his property. Next time you talk to everybody, please make sure you let them know we only arrest people when there's real, serious evidence, Nielsen said as he skimmed the report. He still needed the deceased's next of kin. Apparently she was a reporter or something, working out of the country on an assignment. Tracking her down wasn't proving to be easy. If he didn't get in touch with her soon, he'd have to notify the fiancé. They always notified the next of kin first, but when the next of kin wasn't reachable, it looked like he'd have to call the fiancé. Fuck, he hated this part of the job. Hated when he had to shatter a life like this. Although he'd never had anything like this. Never. Violent deaths, yes. But to this degree, no. Never anything so brutal, so violent, and they had no suspect. No suspect, no possible suspects. No fibers. No prints. No fluids. It was like a ghost had left that body at Riley's place. A ghost. Or a cop. Somebody who knew an awful lot about cleaning up a body, that was for sure. But then again, anybody with access to cable or the internet could learn all sorts of shit about forensics these days. So? Scowling, Nielsen looked up at Prather. Look, there is no way in hell I could possibly make an arrest on Riley's stick, assuming I even thought he was guilty, which I don't. Now if you have something other than this to talk about, please do. If not? Maybe it's a team thing, Prather suggested, narrowing his eyes. A team thing? Jennings echoed, lifting a brow, a smile quivering at the corners of his mouth.
Yeah.
Jennings might find this all amusing. Nielsen didn't. For fuck's sake, he snarled, hurling his pen down on his desk and rising. Glaring at Prather across the desk, he leaned forward. Have you seen the woman he's got staying at his house? Let's assume, just for the hell of it, that he is some sort of psycho killer. Do you really think he's stupid enough to orchestrate some murder when he's got a woman staying at his place? He'd want privacy, Prather. Get that? Privacy. He's an arrogant bastard. Could do that to avert suspicion. Get out of my office, Prather. Now. Dropping back behind his desk, he kept his attention focused on it as he waited for the sound of the slamming door. 15 seconds later, it came. He looked up and met Keith's gaze. That man causes more trouble every damn day. Keith opened his mouth, then closed it. Nielsen lifted a brow. Yes? You stating a fact or asking my opinion? Technically, I shouldn't do either. Sighing, he rubbed his hands over his face. This whole mess has my head so screwed up. It should. This isn't supposed to be easy on us, is it? Keith mused. No. No, it's not. He pinched the bridge of his nose and then focused on Keith once more. You think there's any merit to what Prather was rambling about? Just how honest could he be here? Keith wondered. Rising, he absently linked his hands behind his back. Years out of the military and still, those habits were ingrained. May I be completely honest, Sheriff? If I didn't want your honest opinion, I wouldn't have asked for it, Nielsen pointed out. It's my honest opinion that Prather wouldn't have an idea with merit unless somebody picked it out for him, wrapped it up, and presented it to him with a big, shiny bow. For a moment, Nielsen stared at him. Then he started to chuckle. You're probably right about that. Shit. He looked back at the reports on his desk and sighed. This is such a damn mess. That it is. Keith shifted his gaze to the board standing in the corner, his attention focused on the victim's face. She'd been pretty. Happy. She'd had her whole life spread out before her. All that bright hope ended. Such a damn tragedy, Nielsen muttered. Keith looked over and saw that Nielsen was studying the victim's face as well. Yes, Keith said softly. A waste. Abruptly, Nielsen sighed and looked back down at the reports on his desk. I need to go over these again. There's got to be something I'm missing. If you'll let me see the coroner's report, I'll go through it again. Silence fell, finally broken by a grunt from Nielsen.
Yeah.
You do that. I need to shoot off an email. Nielsen reckoned something in his tone alerted Jennings. An email.
Yeah.
He swallowed and glanced at the board, at Jolene's pretty, smiling face, and the ruin next to it. It's her next of kin. The lady is out of the country. I finally got a way to contact her. Jennings grimaced. Hell. Made sense, in Prather's mind. But what he needed was proof. Clean. Too clean. Almost like a cop was in on it. A cop. As he stomped down the street, he tossed that idea around in his mind.
Yeah.
Maybe that was it. They alibied each other. Stupid city fucker knew how to clean things up, after all. Proof. Needed to get proof. Only one way to do that, though, since Nielsen wasn't listening to reason. The hell you are. Hope glared at Law over the box packed with envelopes and books. You told me you were hiring me to do a job. That's what I'm trying to do. Some of these packages have been sitting around so long, they've got dust on them. So what? Hope tried to ignore the itchy, crawling sensation dancing along her spine. I'm just driving into Lexington. I'll be gone long enough to find a UPS store and a Target. I need some clothes. Fine. He gave his desk a disgusted look and started rummaging around for his keys. I'll come. No, pivoting away, Hope hooked her hands behind her neck and said, Law, you know I love you, right? You know I wouldn't say anything to hurt you, intentionally. Right? He remained silent. Shooting him a narrow look over her shoulder, she said, I'm suffocating, and if I don't get a little bit of breathing room, I'm going to have a breakdown. She wasn't exaggerating, either. Earlier, she tried to turn the doorknob to get out of the bathroom, and she couldn't get it open. She'd forgotten she'd locked it. She'd started to panic, locked in, locked in, locked in. Even the memory of it was enough to have panic trying to creep in, and she had to throttle it into submission, beat it down before she turned to look at him. "I'm fine," she said. "I am. But I need to get out of this house, for just a while. It's not safe. Law, nobody is after me." "We don't know that," he shouted. She flinched, and when the self-disgust glared in his eyes, she could have kicked herself. "Don't we?" Slicking her hands down the front of her worn jeans, she said, "Don't tell me you haven't already had somebody check up on Joey." "I won't believe it." He said nothing. Neither did he look away. The truth was there, in those uncompromising hazel eyes. With a faint smile, she said, "It's not him. If Joey wanted to get to me, he'd come after me. Not some woman I didn't know. And other than you, nobody here knows me." "Psychotics don't always target people they know," Law pointed out. "And do you really think he's going to come after me in broad daylight?" "I'll be gone 2 or 3 hours, Law." Her hands were starting to shake, she realized. Shaking, sweating, closing them into fists, she sank her nails into her skin, hoping that minor pain might clear her head. "Part of the reason why I left him was because I was tired of being afraid all the time. Tired of feeling trapped, tired of being trapped. If I let something like this cage me again, then it was all for nothing, Law." She swallowed the knot in her throat. "I can't live like that. I can't go back to that thing he made me into. I can't. And just letting me tag along, what does that hurt? You've always made it so easy to lean on you, Law." Blowing out a sigh, she looked up at him. "And right now, I want that. I want it too much, which means I can't let myself do it. I spent the past 2 years standing on my own. I've come too far, and I won't let some monster take this away from me. Not now." Hope, something sad, dark moved through his eyes. "Don't." Shaking her head, she held his gaze. If he kept pushing, she'd give in, and she'd hate herself. She had to do this, had to make herself be strong. It was getting too easy to lean on him, too hard to fight the need to do it. If she couldn't make herself stay strong around him, then she wasn't going to be able to stay here. She studied the box in front of her and then looked at him. "Come on, use that brain of yours. Is it really very likely somebody's going to try to hurt me? Nobody knows me. I don't know anybody." Law reached up and pressed the heels of his hands to his eyes. "Shit. This is insane. I am not doing this, not thinking this. 3 hours. I just need 3 hours." He snorted. "You expect me to believe you'll be there and back in 3 hours? You did mention a target, right? The word shopping? I'm not the clothes horse some people are." She shrugged. "I just need a few things." He rested a fist on the box sitting on his desk. "Anything happens to you, I'm going to be really pissed off." "Me, too." Eyeing the box on his desk, she said, "How much money is that going to cost?" Law shrugged and unearthed a wallet from somewhere. The man had already made his desk a disaster zone again. Hell, he was a disaster zone. He pushed a few 20s into her hand and said, "That ought to cover it." The box was addressed to his agent. Sealed inside were padded mailers, smaller boxes, and envelopes. When asked about that peculiarity, he'd shrugged and said, "People can look at postmarks." My luck, somebody from here would win a book and put 2 and 2 together. This way, she mails them out, they're postmarked from New York, and I'm happy with my little paranoias. As long as he was happy with his paranoias. "You're sure you can find your way around okay?" he asked. "I'm fine." She had to get out of here, and as much as she loved him, even as much as she was tempted to lean on him, take comfort in how solid and steady he'd always been, she needed a breather from Law. She adored the man, but ever since that night, she couldn't go 15 feet without him poking his head out of his office to check on her. He wouldn't leave the house without her, and the few times they'd left the house together, it hadn't been pleasant.